I mean, we had a terrible experience with the ones that were handling it at the time of the missile crisis. They were going to send 60 people into Cuba right during the missile crisis. Nobody knew what they were doing. They never talked. They explained. I just heard about it because one of the fellows who was going to go wrote me, or got in touch with me and said, we don't mind going, but we want to make sure we're going because you think it's worthwhile. And I checked into it. Nobody knew about it. And then the CIA didn't. The top officials didn't, and we pinned it down to the fellow who was supposed to. He was supposed to be in charge, and he said we planned it because the military wanted it done. And I asked the military, and they never heard of it.
Oh my God!
This is the same fellow who did put the tunnel under Berlin, and so he was. You remember that tunnel, 1948? They constructed a tunnel under and built it up into the intelligence office of the.
Yeah.
Which was a hell of a project.
Yeah.
But he did that better than he did this. Of course, I was furious because I said you're dealing with people's lives. And the best of the Cubans, and they're the ones that volunteer, and then you're going to go off with a half-ass operation such as this. We had a meeting at the Pentagon on it. I never saw her. I've never seen him since.
Bill Harvey, in the CIA fashion, instead of being retired as he should have been, was sent as station chief in Rome, where I believe he drank himself to death, or at least into retirement.
As the House committee would learn, Harvey maintained his friendship with Johnny Roselli long after his exile to Rome. It was this connection that was of serious interest to the committee, and they wanted to ask Harvey about it. Unfortunately, Harvey died of a massive heart attack within weeks of his scheduled testimony. The committee investigated Kennedy's assassination for close to 2 years and issued its final report on July 17, 1979. It concluded that neither the Soviets nor the Cubans had anything to do with the assassination, but they still believed a conspiracy was at hand. Quote, "The committee believes, on the basis of the evidence available to it, that President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. The committee is unable to identify the other gunman or the extent of the conspiracy," end quote. Although they refused to name names, the committee suggested for the first time that individual members of the CIA, of the Mafia, and of anti-Castro groups may have been involved in the assassination of President Kennedy. The committee concluded its investigation not because it had exhausted its subject, but because it had run out of funds. It remains the last word on the Kennedy assassination.
The priorities, especially for instance, in the case of the House Select Committee on Assassination, turned out to be getting a report done in time, getting a report done within the financial restrictions that were imposed upon us by Congress. And so there wasn't a totally valid investigation at any level of the House Select Committee on Assassination.
But let me ask you this, aren't you now leaving us in a state of suspension? Because at the very end of your investigation, you really come forth with the most dramatic, the most suggestive evidence that there was some kind of conspiracy. So isn't it logical that you go on, or at least that somebody pursue this?
Well, I think it ought to be pursued, yes. Probably the Justice Department would be the proper department, the FBI itself in terms of the King investigation, and the Justice Department and the Kennedy investigation.
Since the conclusion of the House committee, all investigations of Kennedy's death have been left to the public, and the public has made a mess of it. In the early 1990s, movie director Oliver Stone lit a fire of controversy with the distribution of his conspiracy movie, JFK.
The reason that I think Oliver Stone's film, JFK, was a necessary film to make is not because I agree totally with Oliver's conclusion, but because it was a great filmmaker making a movie that made people ask questions. And I think questions have to be asked.
Your movie is a vast tissue of falsehood, deception, and distortion. To that end, I challenge you personally, one-on-one, to debate publicly the facts of President Kennedy's assassination. I expect you to decline this invitation because your movie cannot be defended on a factual basis.
I think Oliver's film was a very, very valuable movie because it made them open the files to a degree, and it raised a lot of questions. I mean, you know, I think we're all being very hoodwinked by the Warren Commission. And in my lifetime, we'll never actually know the truth, if the truth is ever to be known. But except in my humble opinion, it was not Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone. And I don't think the Kennedy family thinks it was either.
The reactions to Oliver Stone's movie were quick and often angry, and they were rebutted most forcefully in Case Closed, a best-selling book by investigative reporter Gerald Posner.
I think the answer to this assassination is found in Lee Harvey Oswald's life. There's no question. Because what we've never had in this country, the American public has never had a reason to understand why Oswald ended up on the 6th floor of the depository shooting at Kennedy. What I try to give you is such a psychological and detailed profile of Oswald's life that you as the reader finally understand why he killed Kennedy. And I think you do see it in this book. A man so disturbed over a period of time, psychologically imbalanced, very violent, somebody who tried to kill an American Army general, that by the time November 22nd comes around and he goes up and takes his rifle to that corner window to shoot at Kennedy, you really understand why he's there.
Instead of closing the case, the book has only created more controversy.
I have read Posner's book, and it is beyond question the most blatantly dishonest, intentionally, factually corrupt book ever written in American history, let alone the assassination of President Kennedy. There is no saving grace about it. He lies, cheats, wrongs, and defrauds.
While we will probably never know who killed Kennedy, we may ultimately know why he was killed. We are still engaged in a struggle for information on the assassination. This documentary, for example, is the first forum to present the original Zapruder film, some 35 years after the event. Some answers will come with new information and the release of new documents, but the reasons for the assassination will not be found in the archives or the locked cabinets of government. Instead, the reasons will be ferreted out through a struggle for history as we gain a new perspective on the dynamics of the past. Kennedy was assassinated at the height of the Cold War, a time of intense ideological crisis. Kennedy was making decisions that were affecting the outcome of that war and the institutions of government. Along the way, he was making enemies. To get a handle on the assassination, it may be best to look to Kennedy himself for answers. What was he fighting for? Who was he fighting against? What was he concerned about?